So you graduated HIFS and you came from South Africa as a madrasah student, and now you're coming into Western academia and Western schooling. What was it like studying philosophy in a Western lens?
So I would say actually I did not dichotomize between these two. Like I didn't separate what is Western and what is Islamic, especially initially. My goal actually from the onset, as I started taking courses in philosophy, first at the University of Toronto and then later on at Columbia University, what I would do is each paper that I would write, I would find some connections with Islam, right? So for example, there was a class that I took in introductory ethics, and the final paper was on the question of whether it was fine for a younger person whose father was being, you can say, brainwashed by a certain type of media on YouTube. Is it ethical for that child to go and kind of play a bunch of like sports videos or things that are perhaps healthier ideologically for the parent, so that it messes with the algorithm? Is that an ethical thing or an unethical thing for him to do? And so I wrote the prompt was actually for you to either take the utilitarian position or deontological Kantian, ethics, right? So what I did is first I presented what John Stuart Mill would have said, what Immanuel Kant would have said, and then I actually completely switched to the Islamic position, right? So taken from usul al-fiqh, right, and qawaid fiqhiyya, from legal maxims. What would be the principle that would guide this question, right, from a fatwa perspective? And so I answered from an Islamic ethics perspective as a kind of superior position to both of these. So almost any paper that I wrote, I would say perhaps over 90% of the papers that I wrote had some kind of Islamic influence in it. So my goal was not necessarily to dichotomize, but to synthesize. How can we take what Islamic academia has to offer that is perhaps hidden to Western academia, and then to kind of infuse that, or to kind of allow these two oceans to meet at some point, right? So that was kind of my goal. So I wouldn't say it's a madrasa context to Western academia, but I would say it's a kind of merger.
So it can merge at one point, but at the time when it does conflict, when you have Jeremy Bentham and you have utility and all the emphasis on independence, and then you come from a more spiritual Islamic lens, there are times where you do hit a conflicting position. How did you deal with that in your philosophy?
Yeah, so I think the madrasa background is actually very important from that perspective, because in madrasa, you are actually taught to think from a kind of structural perspective of how Sharia actually functions. So there are areas of conflict, but I would say conflict, especially in Islam, is not as binary as it sounds. Especially, for example, in Hanafi fiqh, your entire job is reconciliation. You're taking hundreds of thousands of ahadith that at times seem to be conflicting with each other, and you reconcile them. So I wouldn't say it's a black and white question of at the same time, we have to consider that there are areas where Islam will actually align with certain ethical norms, but then will depart on certain points. And Western academia is not closed to that idea. Western academia actually enjoys being critiqued. So to proffer a new position, something that might have been uncovered or not discovered by them, is actually perhaps very exciting for a lot of professors. So I didn't find that to be a challenge at all.
I can imagine the scene of you walking into a Western classroom and you're clad in your thobe and you're adorning the kufi and the turban and you got the big long beard that you're wearing, and you hand in that paper. What was the reception that you received from the professors and the teachers? Were they curious, or were they more offended by your comments?
Yeah, so it really depends, I would say. For the overwhelming vast majority, I would say they're very welcoming and they're very excited to have somebody from a little bit of a different background. You have to remember, these are all very, very highly educated people, right? Just the process of a PhD, right? It takes them to meet all sorts of different people. They're reading about 75 books per year, so almost like, you could say almost over one book per week. So, and this is for 6-7 years. So these are not people that are, your average person. They're specialists, right? So, and they've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of students. So I wouldn't say that. I would say overwhelming vast majority of them were very excited, and you can say even very respectful, right? And I'll give you many examples of that. You would see, for example, I took a class that was called Ways of ʿilm at Columbia University. It was a class on epistemology, but particularly Islamic epistemology. So the professor in that class was Dr. Elaine Van Dalen. So she's Dutch. Obviously, she's not Muslim or anything like that. But she would, for many different aspects, she would actually defer to me in class. Like if there was some kind of, difference that we were having as a class. It was a seminar, so it was a very close-knit class. If we were differing on some point in the text, then she would just, refer to me. So she was very humble in that perspective. I remember some of the readings. One of the readings I had actually mentioned that Imam Shafi'i would give, in his epistemology, he would give preference to hadith over the Quran. And I said that's absolutely wrong, right? And I told her, look into Kitab al-Risala. And what she does is after class, she actually does go to Kitab al-Risala, she reads it, and then she posts a long message, for the entire class to read that actually the reading is mistaken, and Imam Shafi'i prefers the Quran over hadith. So I would say overwhelming vast majority of them are actually very, very welcoming.